This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, Isotope, and API. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now on the Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre in an API lunchbox mixed carefully through Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
The vents had filled with water, so many parts of the ceiling were on the floor. And so it was really difficult to navigate the space and move around in it. It was treacherous. And it's icy. There's ice everywhere. I mean, my monitors had icicles hanging off of them, and the ceiling clouds had fallen in on the console, and I could barely get to the racks. I could see that the water level was about just above my knee in the control room.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. In my studio, I've got the Mac Mini M1 paired up with the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution to connect to all my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The Spectra 1964 C610 comp limiter brings fast, clean, quiet compression and limiting to your recordings and mixes. The C610 includes the famous Spectra 101 amplifier used in legendary studios like Stax, Ardent, and Record Plant. I love using my C610s for drums, vocals, guitars, and especially bass, which now sounds bigger than anything I've ever recorded before. Make your mixes rock at spectra1964.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is very special. It's Brian Charles, a producer, engineer, plugin designer, and teacher from Boston, Massachusetts. Brian has been a fantastic guest on the podcast before on episode 174 to talk about working with indie rock bands and his studio up there in Boston. He's worked with thousands of artists over the years and has made albums in almost every genre imaginable. Some of Brian's many credits include the Vatican Commandos featuring a young Moby as the lead singer, Dispatch, pop artist Marina and the Diamonds, Weekend Friends, and his longtime work as a producer and touring member of the band, the Sheila Divine. Brian is also an educator working with Berklee College of Music, Emerson College, the Walnut Hill School for the Arts, and the Recording Workshop. He's the creator of the Transatlantic Plate Reverb at his plugin company, Rare Signals, where he digitally recreated the iconic plate reverbs of his studio, Zippah studio in Boston. This is an important episode because tragically in December of 2021, his home-based studio, Zippah Recording, of almost 33 years, was destroyed, completely destroyed in an 8-alarm fire. Incredibly, the music community came together and is still coming together to help fundraise in support of Brian's studio and his family recovery after the devastating loss of many decades of instruments, recording equipment, and musical history. Rockstars, just imagine, your studio, like everything you've ever collected, creating music for decades, just all of a sudden just, going in one swoop like that. So I'm excited to have Brian here to talk about this stuff, to see what we can do to help, and also just talk about these wonderful records that he's been making. So thank you again so much to Mark Rubel at Blackbird Academy for originally making our introduction. Please welcome back Brian Charles to Recording Studio Rockstars. Brian, are you ready to rock again, my friend?
Lidge, I am ready to rock once again.
Dude, That's a tough question. I thought about asking you that question as I launched this. Are you ready to rock? It's like, well, it might take me a moment to get things together, but welcome back. Where would you like to begin, man? We just our hearts and sympathy and understanding and just the sadness goes out to you for the stuff that has happened to you recently. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very fresh in my mind, so it's probably a great place to start. On December 17th, I was woken up by a phone call, and it was another tenant in the building where my studio, Zippah, has been. And they said that the building was on fire. And this is 5:30 in the morning that this call came in. And I obviously was like half asleep. And I said, "What?" And they repeated it. And my wife could hear through the phone. And she popped up out of bed. And so I realized this was not a dream. This was actually happening. And we literally just put our shoes on and ran for the door and hopped in the car. And it's about 10 minutes away, and drove over to the studio area. And the air was black. You couldn't
Whoa.
you couldn't see a foot in front of your face. And there were flashing lights everywhere, police cars. There were sirens. We couldn't get close to the studio. It was that bad. And the smoke was so thick, even like a mile down the road. And eventually we appealed to an officer at a roadblock who let us park just beyond the roadblock. And we proceeded to run towards the building. And it was really hard to see. The streets were filled with water. I mean, we were sloshing around. We were freezing. We didn't dress for this.
Right. December in Boston is not exactly welcoming, weather.
Yeah. And at 5:30 in the morning, it's pretty dark anyway. And the smoke and everything else just, didn't help. And we eventually ran to the building and to the area where it was. And there were crowds and crowds of people and fire trucks. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm looking at the building, and there were just flames leaping into the air and water and chaos.
Wow.
So the landlord and two other people were living in the building. And so I was trying to call the landlord to see if he was okay. We've become quite close over the years. He's an 83-year-old man. And I was really concerned about him, especially, and also the kind of the custodian in the building. And there was another tenant as well. I couldn't reach him. I guess his phone was left inside, but this 83-year-old man climbed out of a second-story window and down a ladder. It was just unbelievable.
Wow.
And he's this tough as nails kind of guy that works on cars, and he's like a Cadillac parts guy, vintage cars and stuff. So, he was always up on the roof doing something, or he's one of those fearless kind of guys. But that was something.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we found everybody, and we stood together, and it was sad, and there were tears, and there was sort of shock, and everybody trying to comfort each other as it was happening. But it's really hard to describe how it felt, because you can't possibly, I couldn't process what was going on, everything that was happening in that moment. But we stayed there and basically watched it burn until the sun went down.
Good Lord. Just standing there all day watching.
Yeah.
I mean, you started at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah. And I mean, there were things that happened throughout the day. And, as it got lighter, and, we realized that, these firefighters were really feeling for us. And Annie, who also is, an important part of the studio. She's an engineer and a producer at Zippah as well, has been for like 12 years.
Yeah. Is she the woman with long blonde hair that I saw in some of the videos?
Yes.
At the studio with you? Yeah.
Yeah, she's fantastically talented. And she showed up as well. She was there, and a couple other friends came by as well. But we got to talking to the firefighters throughout the day, and I said to one of them, I showed him a picture of the control room, and I said, "Hey, I don't know what it's like in there, but I see that you're going in and out. And if you go in and you see these silver boxes with, I was pointing him to my drive array, my raids. And he went in and came out about 5 minutes later with 2 buckets of raids of my drives, and they're soaking wet. He was like, I had to reach into the water, grab these out. I don't know if they're okay, but I hope they are. I hope it's what you want. I hope it's what you need. And I'm eternally grateful to this guy because I'm happy to report that they've been through data recovery, and I have recovered my active projects that were in flux. I was in the middle of 8 full-length records when this happened.
Wow.
And about a half a dozen other things that are like singles and, smaller things. And so all I could think about was, how am I going to face these people? I was there. I know how much work went into it. I know how much lightning was captured in the bottle and all of that. And so for me, I thought, if I could just get that data, I could get right back to work in some way, and continue these amazing projects that I was very invested in, and I know the artists were.
Wow. So. Wow. Yeah. I mean, and you're an artist yourself, so you are constantly writing and producing for the Sheila Divine. And I don't know what other, projects you're writing and creating for yourself right now, but you must have had stuff that was, your newest music as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of what I do is I do a lot of songwritery kind of stuff in the studio, and a lot of it is co-writing, and there were lots of projects that were in flux. There were all that stuff that you just said. It was all there. Another good thing about that particular probably half hour of having a rapport with this particular firefighter was he was telling me what it was like in there in my unit, and it seems like at the time it seemed like he was able to kind of get to stuff. And I said, if there's anything that you feel comfortable pulling out of there, like, I really appreciate it. And he ran in and he came out with 2 guitar cases, and one was my 1959 Gretsch Duo Jet.
Wow.
And the other one was a Guild acoustic that I had from when I was a teenager. And they were in cases, and he could get to them. For some reason, the way that things were in there, it was difficult to get to some things and easier to get to others. But he grabbed those 2. I opened up the cases. The Guild was filled with like 2 liters of water, and wow. I dumped it over, and I actually laughed because it was sort of like a comedy bit on a television show or something, to see that much water come out of a guitar, and other people were laughing as well. So that was kind of a nice comic relief. But I did think, hey, maybe this will dry out. And the same with my Gretsch. It was filled with water. The water just went into everywhere it could get. And,
well, you know what they say about the wintertime in studios, we're supposed to be running humidifiers anyway.
Yeah, there's lots of humidity in this room.
Yeah. Wow, man. Wow. So yeah, what a trip. So now at this point you've been able to go back in and see something, or how does something like that even work? I mean, is it the kind of thing where you could walk in there, or is it like the structure is probably not there, or maybe they've, I don't know. It's hard to know what questions to ask around something like that.
I can explain. I mean, the building was deemed unsafe, so nobody was allowed to go in,
right?
Like immediately following the fire. And then at some point, the landlord had some of the some authorized people of some sort went in that he authorized to go in, and they grabbed, unbeknownst to me, they grabbed about 14 guitars that were out, like on the wall, on stands, anywhere that they could see something that looked like a guitar or whatever. And they threw them in the back of a Suburban and, the landlord's car, and he drove them to another building that he owns in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And I got a call after they were there. So this is a week later. This is like a week after the fire.
Yeah.
I'd never counted on anybody being able to go back in there or being able to recover anything, but I did go over and find these guitars, and they were piled up on top of each other, and they were covered in black soot. And I could see that, there was some damage. They had frozen and thawed maybe a couple different times. So some of the bodies I could see were visibly just cracked down the middle from that.
Yeah.
But others I wasn't sure about. And, I've since, it was hard for me to look at them. I put them in my basement of my apartment just because I couldn't look at them and I had nowhere to put them. And it was just traumatic. So they were down there. I left them down there for a good couple weeks. And my wife was like, hey, it might be time to bring those guitars upstairs and maybe see if you can get a win of some kind, And so I did. I started bringing them up. My son helped me bring them up. And I found one of the guitars was a Telecaster that my father bought me when I was 13 years old. It was very sentimental to me, and it was covered in black soot, and I'm trying to clean it off and nothing's coming off. And I ended up having to use denatured alcohol to get the soot off the guitar to even see what kind of condition it was in. So, a few hours later, it's looking like a guitar again. And now the wood has all swollen, so the strings are just right up against the neck and it's not playing. So I did this for a few of the guitars that looked like they might be viable, and then put them in a dehumidifier room rather.
Yeah.
Yeah. And things started to move back. So there are a couple Telecasters I think are going to be okay. And, maybe a bass and maybe another guitar, which, at this point, which I'm so grateful to have, just like anything. And these are fantastic vintage guitars too, by the way.
It sounds like you had a real collection of beautiful instruments. And it's interesting to me to think about what other people would think of if they walked into one of our studios and thought, grab something. They think of the guitars, which are wonderful and valuable. But what fireman out there is going to think of grabbing a vintage microphone or a tube compressor or something too?
Yeah, right.
And just so people just don't understand those things, or even the hard drives, Totally. So that's intense, man. That's intense. Now, stuff that comes to mind, of course, the tough questions, which feel free to tell us to stop asking at any time. But, when it comes to the hard drives and the projects and things like that, did you find that you had been able to set up some things beforehand for backing up music and projects that you're like, thank goodness I had this? And then were there other versions of that where you're like, man, I sure wish I had set that up before this happened? And is it fair to ask you that question?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think going through this right now, if nothing else, like if it helps somebody else get through, I mean, God forbid a tragedy like this, but at least give somebody peace of mind knowing that, they're covered in the event of a catastrophic situation like this.
Yeah.
That makes it worth it for me. We were pretty great about backing up every night, and we backed up to a drive array that was configured as a RAID. So we had 2 copies of everything at the end of the night and 1 on the active drive. So there were always 3 copies of everything that was in play, that was in flux. Now,
and they say that's the number. If you don't have 3, you don't have anything, sort of the way.
Oh, is that right?
I think
good.
so. Yeah, I've heard that said. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a believer because if I didn't have duplicate copies of these drives, I wouldn't have been able to recover some of it. And because I had duplicate RAID, striped drives, the data recovery service was able to use both drives to rebuild the file structure and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Now, I wish I had had a cloud backup system, and I've been looking into that and trying to figure out what the best method, for that moving forward is. And
were you aware of Backblaze as one of those options?
Yeah, I had heard about it, and I thought, hey, that sounds cool. I should do that, and I never did.
Yeah.
Then there are a couple others. Carbonite is another one that someone mentioned to me that I've been looking into as well. But I am open to suggestions about that for sure.
Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always someone in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to add collaborators to a project so that the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music. Just upload a voice memo or song and start commenting. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samply.app or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. Want to know how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? Well, I've been cheating all along by using Isotope RX and Ozone on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, EQ, and limiting on this podcast episode. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. I've been using Backblaze. I haven't had a tragedy to test out how much it comes to save my ass, but it does seem to be working, and I've looked and seen that the files are there and stuff like that. And it does a thing where it essentially takes a snapshot. If you dedicate a computer, so anything that's hooked up to that computer in the last 30 days is what's a candidate for having a backup. So if you have a project that's on an archive drive and you disconnect it from the main computer, the studio computer, and it's on a shelf for more than 30 days, then it becomes removed from that backup. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, that sounds like something guys like us need.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, it would be a very helpful way to say whatever I'm working on now should be there. But I haven't tried to come up with a clever way to have everything that I've ever done connected or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's like, I'm like you, I would take older projects and put them on archive drives and, maybe, and have a pair of drives. I just said 3 is supposed to be the magic number. So I guess I'm one short of 3 there, but, have those on a shelf. And then we can talk about whatever you feel like talking about, but obviously it gets as deep as you want to go with like, the drive's in the same location, or do you have to split them up,
Yeah, I wish I had split them up. And, just, related to what we have been talking about previously is I was able to eventually walk into the building and into my space. And I was happy to see that there was no fire in my place, but the water damage, the vents had filled with water and they had fallen through the ceiling. So many parts of the ceiling were on the floor. And so it was really difficult to navigate the space and move around in it. It was treacherous. And, I managed to get to, and it's icy. There's ice everywhere. My monitors had icicles hanging off of them, and the ceiling clouds had fallen in on the console, and I could barely get to the racks, but managed to get to them. I could see that the water level was at its highest was maybe like just above my knee in the control room. And the tube limiters and the big heavy stuff is in the bottom of the rack. Obviously, that's where it goes. And so, there was some stuff that just there was no hope for. But I did manage to pull out whatever I could out of the rack, and David Lyons from Sonic Circus helped me out. Transporting the stuff, and I did go up to his place in Vermont and dismantle some things with a team of techs, and put them in a huge ultrasonic bath, big ultrasonic bath, and
right. That's for that will clean the electronics and things, right?
Yeah, and there's certain things you can't put in there, like power supplies and stuff like that. So some stuff I knew is just going to be like, I don't know. But so we carefully kind of figured out what might we be able to save. And I did manage to save a few like really precious things. One was my requisite limiter that I was mixing down into, and grateful for that because I'm starting to work in other studios right now. I'm bouncing around, and
the loudness wars don't stop for any of us.
Yeah. And if I'm doing, I was in the middle of mixing some records too. And so the consistency of having that was like a really great win for me.
Yeah.
But, I had already come to terms with the fact that, when I walked away the day of the fire, I thought, I have these two guitars and that's pretty much it, you know?
Wow.
And, we did you and I before, and I know I mentioned this a little bit, but I'm talking to you into a U-47 that was rescued and rebuilt, and it was up high on a stand. I had 3 of them. One of them was frozen to the ground, and I couldn't get it out. And the other one, I don't know where it is. And the one that I'm talking to you on now was up high on a stand, and was rusty, soot covered. Still smells pretty horrible actually right now. But I managed
some smelled horrible before a tragedy too.
Right. I did manage to, have it serviced, swapped out. I'm pretty familiar with the circuit, and so I'm comfortable working on these. So I replaced the capsule. I replaced the resistor board at the bottom of it, and all the capacitors inside of the mic. And it's a different mic on the inside at this point, but I'm happy to have it. And Telefunken, the people at Telefunken sold me a power supply that they really only sell if you buy a mic from them, and I thought that was really nice. And so I was able to get a vocal mic up that I can bring around with me, which I am really grateful for.
That's great. It sounds awesome right now. So
yeah, we'll see. We're burning it in right now, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Rockstars, let us know if his tone changes by the end of the interview.
Yeah.
I've had a U67 where, somebody worked on it and replaced the Bill Bradley here in Nashville at Bradley Microphones, replaced the capsule with one of his rebuilt capsules. And it's really remarkable how well that can work when it's done well and done right by the right person. So
hopefully I'm the right person in this situation. Otherwise, I'll send it to Bill.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it sounded great. So, it's funny, man. I wrote down this just sort of a silly nod to a word that you hear on the internet now, the Great Reset, right? So I thought about it. I was like, wow, this is like a great reset up for the studio world where I've thought about them like, gosh, if I lost everything. Because I remember when I was many years ago, I was working with Steve Albini up at Electrical, and we asked Steve, it's like, you built this whole studio. How do you do insurance for something like this? And he just kind of, I don't want to speak for Steve on this, but he sort of commented on it as if, well, it's like, you get insurance, but there's no way you can't really replace everything in a studio. And I remember thinking, carrying that with me and thinking about myself with my own stuff, and then thinking, what would happen? And I would often think like, well, I think I just buy a van and an acoustic guitar and just go, just travel and write songs and do whole different things. So with all that said, what kind of stuff pops through your mind? And I know this is early too. And so Rockstars, to put this in some context, this is still very fresh. We're not looking back on this years later right now when we're doing this interview. This is very recent for Brian, and we'll have a link in the show notes, so you can go scroll and click on that, and that will take you to is it a GoFundMe link, or it's the fundraising link where you can see what the latest is if you want to help or contribute or just sort of read Brian's updates on the whole process. You can keep up to date there. But have you just sort of like, what were some of the things that went through your head about like, the reset, the great reset for your studio or your recording or whatever that means,
I used to say to people, I mean, this is something I said often when they would come into the studio and they look at the gear and they would go, oh my God, like, look at me like I'm a crazy audio hoarder or something. And, these are all tools that I've come to rely on, but I've said it before and I'm really feeling this now, but I've said, if I wanted to recreate this, like now, like I couldn't do it. It would be impossible. You couldn't do it over again.
Not the same way.
Not the same. I would have to go collect, I had over 30 years of, gear buying and swapping and finding this and finding that. And, you can't just go out and, buy a federal limiter when you want to, or a set of Collins 212 pre's or any of this rare gear. You just can't do. You can't even go out.
I'm tearing up over here hearing you talk about this.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a U67. You couldn't go out and buy a vintage U67 like the one you have that you love right now.
Right.
You probably couldn't. Like you don't decide when this gear comes into your life a lot of the times, especially if you're dealing with rare and vintage stuff.
Plus the time that we acquire things is often relevant to what the world in the market, for recording stuff looks like at that time. When I got my U67, it was at a time where I might have gone to eBay and gotten something, and that would have been an unusual thing to do. Not, just the ways that we acquire things for the studio just changes over time and over the collecting of all these things too.
Right. And can you imagine if you had to go buy all your favorite gear like now in today's pricing market too?
Yeah.
So that's
so crazy. So maybe do we go to those tough questions now about things that you have learned or are in the process of learning about insurance or insuring our studios and gear? What does that mean? Anything like that?
Absolutely. If you've had a policy for many, many years, like I did, and every year you get that email, and even before there was, it was an email system, I would just go in and sign a thing and then walk out and get on with my day.
Right.
I really wish I had gone through, the minutia of updating the policy. It's not the funnest thing to do, but boy, I wish I had done it because when the insurance company first came to me and they were like, well, how do we go about assessing what's in there? Because nobody could get in the building at this point either. And,
right.
I was like, well, I don't know.
I got a hell of a YouTube channel and you can see it all right there.
There was that. I said, go to the gear page and start there. I mean, the stuff at least that you hang out there for people to see. And then, and immediately I just said, and I don't think I have many receipts, because I'm thinking I'm screwed, right? And he comforted me and he was like, nobody really has receipts. Can you prove that you have this stuff?
Yeah.
And by the way, my adjuster is a bass player and a drummer. So, I think he felt it a little bit, heavier than someone that wasn't a musician would have. And
wow.
But I said, go to my Instagram page. If you want to see anything, I'll point it out for you. I'll send you pictures. I'll circle things, which I did when they were assessing things,
Well, it's crazy because I think about an insurance policy like the one I have, and I just think about like, well, what's the max, And I think if disaster beset or befell, I don't know which word I'm supposed to use. Maybe you're in Boston. Maybe you can help me out with that. Befell me.
I haven't said befell in a long time.
If disaster befell me.
Maybe an old Boston.
I just, in my brain, I think, well, clearly it would they just send a check for the maximum amount, So like even the thought of having to somehow go through a proving process for everything, it's like, come on, you know? So anyway, please do continue, because we are here to learn from whatever you want to help with as well. And we're here to help too. But I
Okay.
mean, yes, these are all things that pop into my head.
Yeah, well, they went through my gear page, which is just kind of the stuff you hang out there, right? Like you don't put headphone mixers and, cabling and chairs and whatever else that is just part of
The
the
stuff you
infrastructure.
actually spend all your money on.
Yeah, clouds, infrastructure, doors, they were up over $500,000 from that, and which was way, way over my cap. And so,
Wow.
but when I had the insurance, I was thinking more about liability. Like, what if some, musician I'm working with walks through a glass door, or,
Right.
like that's the kind
Right.
of stuff I was thinking about with insurance. And you never think, even if you're thinking about like, a disaster of some kind, you think, oh, maybe you're not going to lose everything, maybe like something happens in a room and something
Right.
falls and you need
Right.
to, but, I really wish that I had reassessed you know, the policy, even every couple of years or a few years, because after 30 some odd years, it really is not reflective of what, what was in the building and what I needed it to be.
That's what I think about too. I think about it each year. So the thought that occurred to me not too long ago was, as studio people, as musicians, the hoarder of instruments and gear in us thinks, oh, cool, I got this new thing. Oh, this is awesome. Oh, I just got another guitar. Or like, even if you acquired something in a really great deal or a gift or whatever it is, like something that is valuable, like a tube compressor that's worth a lot, and you now have that, you think, oh, that's what a win for the studio. But something nobody ever talks about is this idea of, well, if you now have this thing that's valuable, now you have another piece of gear in the studio that's worth $10,000 or something like that. I'm picking a high number, and you don't think about the fact that you don't really have it unless you have the thing and have the insurance for that thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yes.
you acquire the thing, but you kind of need to increase your insurance for the thing, and realize that you're also taking on this additional amount of payment every month or year or whatever that goes with that thing. If I'm making sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. You haven't fully acquired it, I imagine, right? Anything could happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like you acquired it, but it could disappear tomorrow unless you also take on the act of like adding it to your insurance or paying that additional amount to cover it. That's the way I'm saying it. I'm no insurance expert, so don't get me wrong on that. It just occurred to me that way, and nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever taught me that. So
Me neither.
I don't know if that's something that you feel like you will have learned in hindsight.
Oh, I'm learning it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. The upstairs, we had a room upstairs that was just kind of like where we kept overflow drum kits and synths and things like that we didn't need immediately downstairs in the studio. And of course that room was upstairs. So all the fire went up. And so everything in that room is gone. And the other thing is, like, so the reason I'm telling you this is not to add to the sob story, but related to insurance, I'm still thinking of things every day that I'm like, oh, wait, I had one of those. Oh, I had one of those. Oh, wait, there was one of the, oh man, I had one of those. I didn't put that on my list. Like a million things, I'm sure will pop into my head over the course of the next year that, it doesn't matter because I was under my cap. But if you are more savvy than me, regarding your insurance, or you try to make it more reflective of your reality, I would urge you to make some lists of everything, do a little at a time. Just keep a note, document in your phone, and it sounds strange, but I wish I had done that kind of a thing.
Just so you had this list of stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the list. And also, it's important for taxes and things like that to have those things,
Are you learning that are you thinking of an easy way to have a proof of an item in hindsight where you're like, oh, I should, that would be a good way to do it. I guess take a photo of something.
It's so easy to do that now. But when you have 30 plus years of stuff, like I'm not bringing my Nikon film camera around with me to take pictures of stuff.
Right.
And you start to amass enough of it that, taking pictures of it is not easy anymore because you have tape closets and you have storage spaces in the studio and a place where you keep road cases. And maybe you have all kinds of overflow that it's just not easy to sort of stage that kind of situation.
Yeah. The API Select T25 is a classic 2-channel FET feedback-style compressor limiter with a Class A tube output stage and custom API transformer, allowing split mono or stereo mode. Built with dual triode vacuum tubes, sidechain de-essing, detent controls for accurate recall, and API's famous thrust mode, the T25 represents a new design in tube compression. Bring the legendary sound of API to your home studio with the new Select T25 at apiaudio.com. You've already invested in your speakers, headphones, and the sound treatment of your studio. So you're ready to make great music, but your mixes don't seem to translate to the rest of the world when they leave the studio. The problem is that the frequency response of your room is not allowing your speakers to tell you the whole story. SonarWorks Sound ID Reference can solve this for you by calibrating your speakers and headphones EQ and balance so that you can now make better mix choices. Start with a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com. I have asked my interns at times to help go through that. I mean, I had them go through and just make a spreadsheet of all the microphones that they could find at one point just to have a list of it. And, that stuff is hard to do. It's hard to do. And I've always thought that the many photos in the studio would be helpful. And then the, recall photos in the control room and things like that taken with cell phones, with iPhones. And then also, video production made, you just would see stuff in there. But I don't know how helpful that stuff is. It's hard to know with all that. But I agree with you.
It is helpful. It is, Liz, because that was how I think that's how I proved that I had a lot of this stuff,
Yeah. And then you pointed out, if I hear you correctly, I think you pointed out that a likely experience for us is that we might demonstrate enough things that we essentially hit our max on insurance anyway. And then beyond that, it doesn't really matter because it's like, if you have a car wreck, if you just have a certain number of scratches, you might have to prove so many things. But at a certain point, they just total the car, that expression where it doesn't really matter how many more bumps and scratches there are. They're just here's what we're going to give you for that whole car kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. But if my policy was more reflective of what was in there, that wouldn't have been the case, So that's one thing I learned, a big lesson.
Yeah. Well, wow, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what is the if we don't want to wait, if we want to go check it out right now, where should the rock stars go to? What's the link that they should check out to go learn more about the ongoing story and the effort to help you guys recover the studio and the fundraiser and all that?
Yeah. Well, there is amazingly, there's a GoFundMe recovery fund set up by my sister-in-law and Annie from the studio on the day of the fire that afternoon. And I think the consensus was, I think my sister-in-law said at first, she's like, the most helpful I can be right now, instead of standing out here and watching this with you guys, is to help you make some kind of recovery fund so that you can have a little peace of mind right now. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's amazing. And I think it was pretty remarkable to see the music community coming together to, reach out and help. And it really is, it's beautiful to see the power of community, what's possible when everybody is able to help,
it was, I mean, it still is heart expanding. I had no idea of the support that was there for me. I had no idea. And it still, if I think about it, when I think about it, and I do, it really is emotional. It's an emotional thing for me. So many of these people that are donating and that have donated are friends of mine, clients of mine, colleagues of mine, peers of mine. Um, it really feels like the community is just so real.
Yeah.
And um, the things people say about the studio and about me, which I'm super duper flattered about, but you don't get to hear that stuff because usually they say it after you're gone. So,
Yeah. Wow.
and it was a very cathartic feeling. All the ranges of emotions, but that part of it, the community and the support and just the words, and it's still the thing that's kind of holding me up right now.
Well, I mean, you've just been so present and active for decades in the community, the local community there, and working with artists from all over and, touring and playing in your own band. And if I even just, look at your track record of teaching in different school environments and, starting a YouTube channel, working with some other local musicians. So the Tuesday Night Recording Club, we should talk about that too, because it's cool stuff you guys are doing. But just that act of reaching out and connecting is a cool thing, and it is a great way for us in our studios to participate in and build this kind of fabric of connection to the music community as well. I mean, for me, starting a podcast has felt like that, and you know, I understand your feeling. I constantly feel like I am coming up short in understanding just how much of a connection it is to everybody. That's kind of the feeling that I have for myself.
Well, you did a wonderful thing too with, taking on the studio environment in the home
Thank you.
issue. And, you've been a spearhead of a community. You're great at it. And you have the gravitational pull of recording studio rock stars and the body of work that you've done and all the musicians that you've worked with and the things that you've done. So I think you get it, more than a lot of people. And so that, how lucky it is to feel that there is that sense of community. It's a real gift to feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about, we can talk about that in just a moment, like what I did in my studio to kind of rebuild it. I didn't have a tragedy like yours, but I had, this problem of not being able to work effectively. And it was nice to say, you know what, I'm going to try and do this new special thing for my control room, redesigning it. And you're going through that same thing. So let's talk about you. What are some thoughts that you've had? What's bounced around your head as far as what you might like to do next?
I have been freelancing. I feel like I'm going back to my roots in my early 20s and bouncing around between a couple studios in town. And I'm so grateful for that because these studio owners and friends of mine opened the doors. They just opened the doors and they both said to me, I'm going to give you a list of open dates and you can just take them. You can just take them. You don't have to pay for them. You can get acclimated and get back on your feet and we're here for you.
That's
And
great.
man, that hits home, so that's been incredible. And it's allowed me to dip my toe back in the water of kind of how am I going to maintain consistency without my home base? Because that was one of my big things. And I think on the last time we spoke, I think we talked about that a little bit, how, or like, I think it was like when you asked, like, what would you go back and tell yourself like at that time, which is something way different now, but like, I would have said, try to find a way to create consistency in what you're doing, because once I had that home base, that room that made sense to me, that workflow that was repetitive in a way that I didn't have to think about it, I started getting results that were that way as well.
Yeah.
And now I don't have that in the same way. So I'm trying to find a way to make that happen. And I am looking at spaces. I do want to rebuild the studio very badly. And it's just, I realized I had a really sweet deal with the location I was at, right in the city, right on the T with a parking lot, really affordable. And the places I'm looking at now are 3 times the price per square foot, at least. And they're farther away. They're not part of the hotbed. And that bums me out because
you built the hotbed as part of the artist community. That's one of the things we get to give ourselves credit for. When we set up camp in a part of town that is welcoming to artists and where we think this would be a cool place to build a studio, to put in a studio, a lot of times the neighborhood changes around us over the next couple of decades and becomes this amazing, wonderful place because all of us artists and musicians and studio owners move in and start there. And so, later down the line, we inevitably are going to have that feeling of like, wow, I can't afford to live where I started. The place I built is not a place where I can afford a place necessarily.
Yeah, that's totally happened to me. And so many of the artists that I work with are young, live in the city, don't have a vehicle. I love that energy of that people in their 20s that are going for it, and that's a big part of what I love to do, is work with that age group of fresh talent and all of that excitement, and the sky's the limit, for what they'll do, and their future is just completely unwritten in so many ways that, like, those are the things I remember about being that age that I key into. And, as soon as I feel like, and maybe this is just my own silly fear, but I feel like the farther out I go, the harder it is going to be for me to attract and work with that type of clientele.
All your records are going to have to be about, living comfortably in suburbia now.
Exactly. Which, that's okay too. A little bit of that is great. But there's something to be said for that, that environment that I feel like is a really hard environment to find for me right now. And, I'm hopeful, and I'm continuing to keep an open mind and look around.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to dig in deep into what, when you think about it, like what would an ideal studio environment be like? Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I've been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. If you've ever wanted to truly feel like a magician in the studio, then iZotope RX is your magic wand. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you on Instagram about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version are they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or a computer back in the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more mixed-up mix messages from the band. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music, and it all works in your browser with no downloads required. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samply.app and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Brian Charles, joining us from Boston, talking about the tragedy of losing Zippah Studio, and what we can learn from the lessons of the fragility of our own studio sometimes and all that. So, Brian, you ready to continue on to
Absolutely.
jam?
Ready to jam.
All right, ready to jam. I thought I'd make a comment. We're about to jump into, talking about your ideal studio, but I was just thinking about this isn't an isolated story too. I mean, this really can happen. I mean, I remember hearing about it years ago with Doug Easley at Easley McCain recording in Memphis, was lost to a fire, or partly, although I think maybe he rebuilt it, but I know he's moved on to other things. I believe last time I looked years ago. I had a friend, Joe McMahon, right here in East Nashville, a home studio, went up in flames, completely lost everything. And I think, something as simple as an extension cord, a power strip could spark, plugged in, catching some dust on fire or something behind an old piece of gear. So that stuff's scary. I Googled it. I remembered hearing about stuff recently, and, just Googling, I just typed in Virginia recording studio fire, and it's like multiple things popping up, I remember hearing about Blue Sprocket Studio. So I think this is a really, really important topic, and appreciate you. It's very, very tragic to hear about your studio, but appreciate you sharing these kind of words of wisdom and warning to us to really think about this seriously and do our best to make sure we're prepared for whatever. That's
Happy
it.
to help.
So I thought I'd make that comment about that. Now that you are thinking about, your ideal studio, when you sort of envision like what would be kind of awesome, where you're like, oh, that would be really awesome. What are some things that come to mind for you?
Well, I had recently renovated the control room and, had gotten a little bit more serious about the acoustical treatment and, hung a series of clouds and really kind of worked on getting things dialed in a way that we didn't really have before. Like when you start a studio, we started it so long ago that, when you're in your 20s and you get to the point where, oh, look, we can make a record now, you just kind of stop and start making a record.
Right.
And that's kind of how it stayed. And then it got, it would get upgraded every once in a while, a little bit, in the acoustical department. But
well, it's hard to make big changes to a space once you're already settled in.
That's right. You take care of the things that are nagging you,
Right.
like, hey,
Right.
this, I'm always kind of fighting the cymbals a little bit more than I want to in the live room. What can we do about that? And you take little things out,
Take
right?
the cymbals off the drum kit.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes that's what you have to do. But yeah, so, things I've realized about how I've watched, see how things have changed is, Zippah was a taped-based studio originally. And, because of the way that the space was set up, we were set up sort of facing like sideways to the live room. So like the live room was to our left, if you were sitting at the console. So the big window was to the left. And I always thought, man, someday I want to do that thing like we have in all the, when I go into the big studios and the console's facing the window and you can look out. But guess what? Like these days, that's harder to do with a screen in front of you. And so I actually feel like when I rebuild, I'm going to toy with the idea of having that side by side control room and maybe ISO booth on the other side even. So that I have that look to the side, completely open window that I can look through and see the artist, and vice versa, and they can look in and see me.
I think that would be awesome. I think line of sight is ideal in a studio. I was just experimenting where we thought we'd try the thing where we do the kind of, we didn't quite do the Glyn Johns drum miking, and I don't know how critical that is to this part of the equation, but the idea of saying, put the guitar amp right next to the drums and the bass right next to the drums and mic them all up and play together like that and see what it sounds like, as opposed to isolating. And I don't know if we arrived at anything brilliant conclusion-wise as far as the sound of it goes yet. But the thing I could tell right away from playing is just reminded of what it's like to, almost stand over the drum kit and make eye contact with somebody and play your guitar. It's very different from being in different spaces and stuff. So just remembering that, how important it is for us to think about, like, what's it like to play the music in the space, when we think about designing a studio.
Yeah, definitely. And, Zippah was always a music-based studio. We didn't do the other stuff. We didn't do the commercial stuff. We didn't do any kind of voiceover work or anything like that. So we were always trying to think about those types of things, like, like where does the Hammond and the Leslie live, and so we don't have to move it a lot. Where are the pianos going to be? One of them needs to be able to roll around. So we were always trying to think about how we could accommodate musicians in the space. And so I would continue to do that if I could. I just hope I find a space big enough, to be honest with you, in the city.
Yeah.
To do it.
Do you think that you will name your new studio after a lighter again in hindsight?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't gotten there yet, I suppose.
Where did the name Zippah come from? Is there a backstory to it?
Yeah, the studio was originally started by my great friend, Pete Weiss. We're still best buddies. We talk every day. And a friend of his, Ken Thomas. And we were all buddies. But the studio was originally called Ziploc Recording. And these are guys in their early 20s. It's just a fun kind of, hey, we got this space where we can hang. And it was just kind of like a creative open place. And, no control room. The control room actually ended up being what is like one of the ISO booths now, or what was one of the ISO booths now. See, I have phantom limb syndrome with the studio. I still talk about it like it's here.
And of course, the Ziploc referred to bringing, some chips with you for fuel, not the other creative fuel that sometimes came in a Ziploc bag.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, these guys got a cease and desist from the Ziploc bag company for some reason, this tiny little studio. And I don't know, somebody they were working with, one of the, Western Mass Worcester metal bands or something, put Zipper recording on the back of their thing because they couldn't use Zippah. Ziploc.
Ziploc, yeah.
Ziploc, but the way everybody was saying it with the Massachusetts accent, I guess, around then was they were saying Zippah. So It just kind of, I think Pete started to spell it that way, and it was sort of a funny thing. And, I came on 2 years after the studio. Pete had the studio. I came on as an owner a couple years later. But it just kind of stuck. Once it's on the back of a bunch of records, it doesn't matter how stupid the name is, it's sticking. You're just stuck with it. So,
did you guys say stuff like, I packed my car in the Zippah packing lot?
There's a lot of that kind of talk, especially from bands and people that come in. It's become a fun sort of, even if you don't have a Massachusetts accent, you sort of adopt one when you walk in the door.
Nice, man. Okay, so let's see, going back to envisioning sort of this ideal setup. So you were talking about the control room and doing the windows looking out to the sides to other spaces. We had a guest on the show. Apologies for not giving credit where credit's due on this one, but the suggestion, which was great, was discovering that sometimes, in a low budget fashion anyway, the surveillance cameras, when you get these sort of inexpensive surveillance systems for homes where you have, but they're wired, not Wi-Fi, that the latency was quite low, and low enough that they found that it was a pretty good home studio solution for having a having a camera video feed from different spaces too. But
yeah, I think musicians are good at keying into the audio and not have, necessarily needing that sight line. And a good example is, like, I love tracking in Blackbird Studio A when I'm in Nashville.
Yeah.
And that studio is all, as you know, the original room is small, live room is small, and looks out over the front of the console. If you look out over the front, it's there. But the large tracking room is off to the side, and there's no sight line to it. So it's all camera. And they have the fancy camera with the joystick, but it's a little bit of an older system. But even that, like, it becomes less important. Once everybody starts playing, they just start listening to each other, and instinct sort of takes over.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you can hear things really well too. And, I not that we need to go on a tangent, but it also brings up issues of like how important it is to have little to no latency in the audio too, because that becomes the thing that we're listening to. So let's make sure we can hear each other in time and immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, I was trying to think about a rig that I could bring around with me, and something that I could use that was remote in this sort of time of like flux for me. And I came across that Pro Tools Carbon unit.
Yeah.
And I have a floating rack that I bring with me, and it's got carbon in it if I need it, and a thing to spit out to headphone mixers and all that kind of stuff. And it really is like the technology these days, and the way that the computers are so powerful, like with a laptop and the right hardware, you can really have that no latency kind of situation pretty easily.
Is there any chance of getting like a Carbonite version with Han Solo in there helping us on our sessions?
Yeah, Carbonite, maybe the Carbonite backup to the cloud might be what I need. Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it? If you're going to introduce the Rockstars to what carbon is, and that, when you say it's got carbon in it or whatever, like, what are some of the things about this new Pro Tools system that sort of stand out for you as useful elements of it?
Well, for me, I'm a Pro Tools user, and so that's my comfort zone. And you get used to using HDX systems that have no latency to them, and all of the sort of portable options for bringing an HDX system around it's still not that portable. Even if you're using a Sonnet rack and racking up a Mac Pro, and it becomes a whole ordeal. Avid came out with this single rack space unit version they call it Pro Tools Carbon, and it's basically kind of like their version of the Apollo or any the Apollo 8 or any of those kinds of units that are portable. And it's got eight on board. It has 8 channels in, 8 channels out, but then it also gives you ADAT. And so I'm spitting 16 channels of ADAT out to my headphone mixers. And it also has 16 channels of ADAT in. So you could add like a Midas, 2 Midas 8-channel pre's that have ADAT on them and get 24 channels into this thing if you wanted to. So
wait a minute. So when you say you're sending out the ADAT to your headphone mixers, what would that look like? What do you use for headphone mixers and how does that connect?
I picked up some of these Behringer PowerPlay units to try them out, and I just think they're pretty great. And they run with an Ethernet style cable, but you can buy an interface where you can feed either analog sources to them or ADAT. And so because the Carbon has 16 channels of ADAT in and out, I decided, well, I'll just use the ADAT out exclusively for my headphone mixers, and I can send 16 channels out of this carbon to the headphone mixers.
Oh, that's cool. So it converts the ADAT light pipe into an Ethernet cable
Yeah,
on its way to the
into
mixers.
yeah, and I think Behringer calls it Ultranet, whatever their system is. It converts it to that. They make the box that does. Behringer makes a box that does that already. So,
had you explored various headphone boxes and Ethernet headphone systems and identified any as sort of really standing out to you? I mean, the Behringer stuff, I have some of their synthesizers, and I know that they can be a hot topic in some discussions. But I mean, if it's as home studio people, I think on looking for that sweet spot of like, well, this sounds pretty great and it's affordable and it does enough things. That's exciting for us, and that's often where the Behringer stuff kind of comes in strong. But does it uses its own Ethernet? Because I know like there's also AVB Ethernet, which is audio video bridge, and turns out to I was surprised when I discovered it using the PreSonus stuff. It turns out that that's been a part of Mac's Ethernet audio system for like a while or something, and that just started showing up in my world through the PreSonus connections. But then there's also RedNet is one of the other ones, right?
Yeah.
And
Dante.
Right.
But AVB is how the carbon connects to the Mac as well. So that's pretty cool.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So,
but I think the last time we spoke, the last time I was on the program, I still hadn't had a headphone system. A headphone mixer style system at my studio. We were still doing it old school, making mixes off of the auxes and sending them out to queues. Shortly after that, I inherited one of those Manley Longevin systems.
Oh, that's the super high-end headphone mixers.
They sounded incredible. Like I would use it as a summing mixer. Those things sounded.
You're like, we're not mixing on the speakers anymore.
Yeah, they really do sound fantastic. But the cabling is massive. You have these trunks of EDAC,
right?
All over the room, and it's just they're unwieldy, but they sound so good that you just deal with it.
Yeah. Isn't the EDAC cable and connector, isn't that what we used to put in the back of our ADATs for analog inputs and outputs?
Yeah. Elcos, EDACs. Yeah, it's like that. But the trunks are gigantic, and they're all over the floor. It's like garden hoses.
It's like having elephants everywhere.
Yeah, it really is. So I did start researching, I got used to how convenient it was to have, individual control over everyone to have that control over their mixes. And, I've gone to a lot of studios and done a lot of sessions in different places. And, I saw those Avion mixers in a lot of places. And when I was searching around and trying to figure out how I was going to make this remote rig work, I stumbled across the Behringers, which look pretty much like the Avion system.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's really what a chance that they look. Yeah,
that might look like a copy of something.
Yeah. So, but for like $1,500 or whatever it was, you can get 4 mixers and most of what you need to get it going. So, I thought it was worth a try. And I also saw that Steve Mark Cantonio, who was had mentioned that he liked him.
Oh, really? Okay. That's good to hear.
That was a good. Anybody who's worked with John Lennon, I'm going to listen to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. So now this again, just to describe how these things can work, you can run an Ethernet cable out to a box, plug that in. In some of the systems, you can plug the box in. I know with the PreSonus one, I could plug the box into the wall, and then the Ethernet cable is sending the audio, or you can have the Ethernet power it. Do these ones self-power off the Ethernet cable?
The audio will travel through the Ethernet cable, but the lights and stuff won't unless you plug it in. However, you can run boxes from, you can chain the distribution boxes together that feed the mixers. And so I have one in the rack that has like 12, I think. I can't see it from here. I think it has about 12 feeds that I can feed right from the rack, but I can send those out to smaller boxes that feed another bank of 4 or 5. And you can chain those together as well. So it really is pretty flexible.
So are you saying that you would, with the headphone box, have the audio coming in on Ethernet, but then you would also have a little power supply wall wart and plug that in somewhere in the vicinity of where the headphone box is living, or that the power comes from that little distribution box down the chain?
Yeah, the distribution box, if you send them out, if you plug the mixers into their individual ports on the distribution box, so you're not daisy chaining them together, then power and audio come through that Ethernet cable.
So that's called PoE, power over Ethernet, right?
Power over the Ethernet, yeah. And so, but yeah, you can also use, just a wall wart to plug in a mixer if it's too far away to feed from that box.
And do you play drums as well yourself?
Yeah, I was a drummer in another life. I'm mostly a guitar player, really. And I'm kind of okay at a lot of things, which is sort of I'm okay with at this point in my life.
And when you hook up the headphones to this box setup, do you feel like you can kind of crank them up to play drums too? Okay.
I haven't tried it yet.
Okay.
I don't really have a place to set up a drum kit right now, but it seems like they would be, just with the initial tests that I've done.
Cool.
And yeah.
Right on. Well, I mean, I think it's really exciting. I love the simplicity that's possible with some of these setups for doing headphone mixes and making it easy for people and getting it to all work and everything. So that's cool. And then I guess the carbon thing that's cool about it is it kind of goes back and forth between dedicating processing to the computer so that we're sort of mixing using our plugins versus giving you the tracks you're recording on. It gives you a low latency version so that you don't hear any delay. Like you can have a combination session or something like that, right? In Pro Tools.
Yeah, because the computers are so powerful now, you can decide, well, I'm just going to use computer processing power for most of this, and then the thing that I'm tracking, I'll use the HDX processing for, and so it really is super handy.
Yeah. "50 years ago, William G. Dilley introduced the world to his revolutionary new dynamics processor, the Model 610 Comp Limiter. A truly unique device, the Model 610 was not only the fastest, cleanest, and quietest of its type, but was also capable of providing completely separate peak limiting and compression functions. Today, Spectra 1964 introduces the Model C610 Comp Limiter, described as the most versatile piece of audio gear you can buy. Great for adding control and power to everything from vocals, guitars, and bass to mixing and even mastering, the C610 gives you the same massive sound that rocked legendary studios like Stax, Arden, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant. I'm using the C610 on every record I make at the Toy Box Studio, and you should too. You'll love it. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini, and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries at my studio, and it works great. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Could you put a plug-in on the track that you're recording on and keep that in sort of a low latency mode with the plug-in on it even?
Yeah, as long as it's a DSP plug-in.
Okay, so you would still need the licensing for some of the DSP plugins come with Pro Tools, and then some third-party plugins you might have to buy one or the other, just a native plugin or a DSP version of the plugin, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. Okay, cool. Cool stuff to know. And then, I think about plugins that I use when I'm recording. There's not that many. A lot of times when I'm recording on a track, I'm not really using a plugin on it, And I don't know how often you find that you're doing that, but I do know guitar emulators and things like that. Or if you really want to like screw up a sound, it can be cool to do some compression on it as a plugin on a track, and so that you're not actually overcommitting compression during the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I do that same kind of thing. Yeah. Virtual instruments or, amp sims or, those plugin alliance plugins. Like there are a lot of DSP versions of those. And I really like the SSL channels on those. And, sometimes if I'm recording a piano, and before you have the vocal and everything in there, you don't want to do too much, but you kind of have an idea that you want to hear it a little bit of a different way. And I like putting those plugin alliance versions of the SSL, like the J in particular on the channel, and using it in DSP mode and having it be non-destructive. And
right. So if you're cutting piano, sometimes you want to take a lot of lows and body out of the piano and get kind of more of a bright, instant compressed attacky sound.
You got it. Exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. What was I going to ask you next? Teaching. I know teaching is a big part of your world too. Anything exciting in that topic you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's just something I started doing in the past few years. And there's a performing arts high school right outside of Boston, and they needed somebody to help them create their audio programs. It's the Walnut Hill School for the Arts. And I got to talking to them. They were really nice people, and the facilities were just outstanding. Steinway pianos and like just old brick and wood, amazing buildings. And students live on campus, and a lot of them are from overseas. And it's just really diverse community. And I kind of fell in love with the place like right away, and agreed to make their audio program, their first ever audio program, and teach it for the first year. And so that happened to be the year that COVID hit. And so I taught half of it in the classroom and half of it on Zoom, which was a challenge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great experience. And, some other people got wind of the fact that I was teaching, and, in the COVID climate, there are a lot of colleges in Boston, and in the COVID climate, there were a lot of teachers that weren't comfortable going and teaching in person. And Emerson was one of the schools that decided to stay as an in-person, to have in-person learning. So
right on. Go Emerson.
Go Emerson. And it worked great. And it has been working great. And they had an opening for a critical listening class, and someone over there by the name of John Cribbett, who used to be, he's a former president of the AES. I've known him for years. He recommended me. And I had not taught on the college level before. But I went and interviewed with them, and I looked at the class and the syllabus and everything. It was based around a book, and I started reading the book, and I was just kind of like, nah, this isn't for me. I don't think I want to do this. I kind of just didn't feel like inspiring to me. And I kind of communicated that to them, and they were like, well, what would you do? And then I was like, what would I do? And so I made an outline and, started kind of building my dream critical listening course, which involved bringing in synths and pieces of gear and microphones.
Cool.
And we made impulses of the back stairwell of the, like now I'm talking in hindsight, but they let me try my own class there. And I'm in my 4th semester teaching that. And it's like one of the highlights of my life.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It is so fun.
It almost sounds like all the things you think would be cool to do in your own studio, but you think like, well, I can't do that this week. I get all these projects to get done.
Yeah, exactly. So when you put 1 day a week aside to go do that, it really feels more like a club than a class. And you'd be amazed at how just the connection between the people in the class, like after the class is over, like even people from my first semester visit me, call me, we share Spotify playlists and title playlists and things like that. Yeah. And so after I got the bug for doing that, there were a couple openings at Berklee. And I'll be honest with you, my end game, and I'm thinking like 10 years from now, it might be nice for me to go teach over at Berklee in those awesome studios with that, all that legendary clientele and the teachers that work there, like Susan Rogers and, oh man, the list goes on and on of just the people that work there. And well, sometimes opportunity comes up quicker than you want it, you plan on. And they had an opening there, and they asked me if I'd be interested, and I took on 2 classes there. So I teach a multi-track recording class and a production analysis lab there. And
cool.
I teach it. My Emerson class is now split between 2 days, and to make it work, because I had a busy studio schedule when I had agreed to do this, I said, if it's right before my Emerson class, I can do it. So Mondays and Wednesdays are my teaching days, and every other day is a recording day.
Oh, that sounds ideal, man. It sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it really is.
What are some things that you feel are common questions that you hear from students in your classrooms? Are there any things that you just, whether they're asked often or whether they just stand out in your memory as, I remember people, so-and-so asked me about this thing. Anything that comes to mind for you?
A lot of the questions I get are about, how do I do this for a living? How do I get to the point where I can make money doing this, make a living doing this? Because there's a lot of these kids, their heads are filled with all kinds of messaging from parents, from just everywhere. And some of the things that I hear are, they're saying, they're thinking that, well, I have to get a real job. I can't really just have this artsy job, this creative job. That doesn't seem safe or, prudent or whatever. And I like telling them that I'm living proof that you can actually do that.
Yeah.
And I have lots of friends that also support this fact. And I often quote the philosopher Alan Watts and tell them, if this is what you're passionate about, you just do it and don't worry about the money. Right now, you're at an age where you can do this and not worry about the money so much. Because if you make it about the money, you'll spend your life doing things you don't like doing just so that you can go on living, which is basically doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. So you just made a circle. And this is something that I feel reaches them, and we start to have real open conversations about projects they're working on, opportunities they have, internships. And while this sounds like grandiose and a rosy way to look at it, at the same time, you have to be realistic and tell these kids that you have to do everything you know how to do in this creative field to really make it work. That's what I found. If you can write, you need to write. If you can play, you need to play. If you can record people, you record. You need to produce people if that's what you want to do as well. And so, it's not all designing your dream job right from the start, but you can have a life in a creative, make a living doing something that you're really passionate about. People will pick up on that. You'll become great at it. You'll get consistent results and reviews from people that you work with because you're passionate about it and you're not just phoning it in, that you can make a living doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're into making weird art music, then you should make weird art music, because there's going to be a need for weird art music in the world.
There's somebody that's interested in everything, right? Like there is a way to do it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. And I remember, kind of taking a long time to realize that, and wishing many times that I had acknowledged that from the very get-go. Maybe I did in my own way, and I just need to give myself more credit for that. But I remember really being pulled and tempted by the things that seemed to be working around me. That's a thing. That's a difference too. Like what we're into at the get-go, um, because it's the get-go, we don't know how to make money at it yet. And so when we look over here and we see something that seems to be succeeding and it's different, it can pull us in that direction because we think, well, maybe I should be doing more of that. And my story was working with, a couple of different bands in the um, late 90s into the 2000s, where on the one hand I was in the studio with one of my very good friends and mentors, and we were bringing in an indie rock band that was young, and everything we were doing was just weird and like didn't fit any mold at all, and was a lot of fun to do. But I always had this, my inner voice told me that, oh, this is like doing your own music with your band. It doesn't count. It's fun, do it, have a blast doing it, but it doesn't count in the big career picture versus spending days and days and days in studios and traveling with a band that was really in search of the major label record deal and in pursuit of, the big success. And I always thought, oh, well, that's, these guys are really driven. They're gonna succeed. So I should hitch my wagon to this train, And meanwhile, I spent, years and so much energy and time in that pursuit of the major thing. And while I was doing this fun thing on the side, and when it all ended, I learned a ton by traveling to all these studios and in the pursuit of the major label stuff. And I'm not specifically name dropping artists and bands. I mean, I'm grateful to have worked with everybody I've worked with, really, to be honest. But like, pursuing the big win taught me a lot, but I never really got a big win out of it. You know what I mean? And then the indie rock thing that we had done just totally for fun ended up actually getting a really fantastic deal signing, and for, financially was actually quite rewarding when it finally came through. And it was just funny to look at that stuff. And even, starting my own home studio, despite all the challenges of having to fight for the right to stay open and all that kind of stuff, has been very fruitful in terms of my career and life and quality of life and the music and records I've made, and even starting this podcast. So like, it's hard to see that the odd idea, and Brian, thanks for letting me talk so much here.
I'm interested. Yes.
Yeah. It's hard to know in advance that the thing that you're into is what you should be pursuing, because, we have this inner voice that's telling us the whole time, like, yeah, can you put your toys away and come to dinner?
Right. Well, none of us, we're not fortune tellers. All you can do is kind of like steer yourself down a path that looks promising. And, those things that you did looked promising to you. Everything you did led you to where you are now.
Yeah.
So
did you struggle with that too? Now you've been able to describe the answer to your students as, I'm here to tell you that you can do what you love doing. But was it always that way for you? Or did you also find yourself chasing wrong directions and having to like kind of right your ship again?
I was pretty much all in from the time I was 18. I knew I wanted to be in music. I knew I wanted to be in a studio. And I don't think I separated those things too much. I did more than I do now, obviously, but because I came up in the same time as you. So I remember when everyone was getting record deals and I was in bands that was getting that had record deals, and you were chasing that major label thing, and you thought, well, all right, so now is not the time for me to be like the guy behind the console. That's kind of like the second in line sort of thing. And I remember thinking about it that way for a time. And things change. And I do feel like, when I went out with the first band that had a deal out to A&M, and I worked in A&M studios as a person in a band, I made connections with people that worked there, and I ended up going back and working there as an engineer. So, it's if you just you don't have to have a complete design. In hindsight, I realized this. At the time, you don't. You just try to make plans, all the time, and every decision you make is a dire decision that's defining you.
Yeah.
When you're young, that's how it seems. But when you look back on it, you go, well, I followed this current, that seemed right to me, the current of the stream, and it seemed right to me. And it ended up being right, eventually. I stuck with it.
Yeah, I like it. I like the river analogy. The first rule of mixing is make good mix choices. To do that, you need to be able to hear your music clearly and accurately. Can you imagine trying to paint a masterpiece while wearing rose-colored glasses, or choosing spices for a new recipe with no sense of taste or smell? You would blindly guess with every brushstroke, or think that your cooking is amazing when actually it's terrible. That's how it feels to mix when the frequency response of your room is impacting the sound of your music. Even after you carefully position your speakers and sound treat your room, you're probably not getting an accurate sound at your mix position. The frequencies in your room can have huge peaks and valleys that are completely screwing up your perspective. This is where SonarWorks Sound ID Reference can help you with the affordable solution for calibrating EQ and balance of your speakers and headphones to give you an accurate flat frequency response. By helping you to hear your music clearly, you can now start to get your mixes right. Get a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com. The API Select T12 is a 2-channel, all-tube Class A microphone preamp designed with API's proprietary AP2516 transformer on the input stage and a custom API transformer on the output stage. Built with the 12 AT7WC and 12 BH7 dual triode vacuum tubes, the T12 represents a new and exciting variation on API's classic preamp technology and provides you with unique tonal options for your studio, handling a wide range of recording applications, including stereo operation. Carefully engineered to provide classic tube performance and sound, the T12 brings you API's famous warmth, punch, and clarity in a new design, including a 5-year warranty. Check out the new T12 Tube Mic Pre and T25 Tube Compressor at apiaudio.com. So your band, one of them, anyway, is the Sheila Divine. Is that a band for you that has been in existence for quite some time? And is that also the band that was interacting with major labels? Tell us a little bit about your musical journey as an artist.
Yeah. I mean, I first started, the first band I was in was with my brother, David. I have a twin brother. And we always played and sang together. And, we had deals with, that didn't work out, with A&M and with Interscope. This is both back in the early and mid 90s.
Mm-hmm. And we probably talked about this also a little in depth on the first episode.
Sure. Yeah, we probably did. But, when the Sheila Divine came to me, it was the late 90s, and it was a 3-piece band. And I probably mentioned this in the last time, but I ended up playing a lot with the band in the studio. And then once the band got signed to a major label, from the indie label they were on got bought to a major.
Is that Rough Trade?
Yeah. Oh, no, that was Roadrunner. Now we are all published on Rough Trade as songwriters.
Cool.
But we, they started playing larger places, and they kind of needed somebody else to fill it out. And so I would come out and play those shows, and it was fun to get play the Beacon Theater and play these bigger festivals and things like that. Then my son was born in 2001, and we were making a second record full length with the band, and we called in a friend, Colin Mahoney, and he was all in to be the guitar player for that record and beyond for a while. And then he had since sort of like moved out west, and then I kind of came back into the picture. So it's always been kind of like low pressure, almost unspoken, and we're all friends. So there had been sort of a resurgence in the band's popularity overseas, and every year we have a huge following in Belgium. So we go over to Belgium, and my wife calls it rock and roll fantasy camp.
Was that straight out of Spinal Tap? We're really big in Belgium.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but we were going over there and doing tours and filling these venues every night over there with a full road crew and the whole deal. And
diamond capital of the world, right?
I don't even know. I like the French fries myself and the beer. But
what I remember about backpacking, taking a train to Belgium with my buddy Jonathan was Antwerp. I think was like a diamond capital or something. Not that we did went to go look or anything, but in Belgium, the place we went to was like 500 beers on selection. Just like they really love beer.
Yes,
I do remember that.
Yeah, and once you get a taste for the way that everything is over there, the coffee, in these tiny little cups of coffee, and it's super potent and it's amazing. And then you come back home and you're going to Dunks and you're getting your gigantic cup of coffee and you're like, what is going on?
All right, so Rockstars, just to put this in context, Boston, of course, is and New England is the hub. To me, it's the hub of Dunkin' Donuts, and then you discover that there's has been this sort of rivalry of Dunkin' Donut coffee versus I don't know what Starbucks or whatever, and on my summer travels last summer, we finally sort of reconciled with the Dunkin' D, and we would stop at them on our travels because it was one of the places that was open. And we discovered, much to our surprise, that their lattes and things like that were quite good, and we were eating vegan. So we were very happy to discover that we could go get avocado toast at Dunkin' Donuts.
Right.
Drive through. So anyway, this is not a Dunkin' Donuts ad, but
sort of is.
I've come around.
Yes.
But I'd rather have a little demi-tasse in Belgium and listen to your band perform in a where would you perform over there? What's the club music scene like when you go travel to another country like that?
A lot of the clubs over there are, the architecture's old, and we're not playing like, sports arenas or anything like that.
Right.
So we're playing like a club circuit there, and they range from about 400 to 1,000, and a little over 1,000, and and that's just the way it is over there, and it's great. It's like really a blast, and I can't wait to get back. We last time we were there we flew back on I think November 24th or 25th or 27th of 2019, late November 2019, and COVID hit like right, not shortly after that. That's the last time that we. Just
in case you didn't know, rock stars. Isn't it funny to talk about anything like that as if anybody in the world is not, totally aware of all of it? But
so we haven't been over there since, and we're just waiting for things to open up to get back over there.
Yeah. Well, it definitely sounds exotic, traveling to tour in a band in another country. I traveled in my youth, 23, we backpacked and rode trains around Europe and, went out to Hong Kong to go play in a band with my brother for a half a year. And I loved all that stuff. And those are all definitely decisions that I made when I wasn't thinking about money, because otherwise I wouldn't have made the decisions. I think I remember, going to travel for 2 months in Europe, and I was like, I've got $1,500. Sure, I can do it,
Yeah.
And it's like, I loved stuff like that. I loved when I was young, and my best friend, Chris King, and I would go and we'd throw a portable studio in the back of a car and go drive all over this country, the US, and go record our own music or record anybody else who would let us set up microphones or record storytellers and poets and, collect all this stuff and have these adventures. And at that point it was like, can I go hit the road for 2 weeks? And it was like, yeah, I've got $150. Sure.
Yeah, that's all it took back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I probably took more than that, but yeah, I think your takeaway is like, fortunately, we can't do math when we're young,
Yes.
We can only do passions and dreams.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about one of the cool things that you did create. Well, actually, before I even do that, I want to point out. So, that's you singing in the Sheila Divine?
No, I wish. Oh my God,
great singing voice.
That's Aaron Perino, the fabulous Aaron Perino.
Okay.
Yeah, and he really is fantastic, and he's the one that sang throughout all of the Tuesday Night Recording Club.
Okay, great
episodes as well.
Great. Well, one of my immediate takeaways was just hearing a quality to the records you're making and the recordings and the mixing and the way it all adds up. And it really did remind me in a comfortable way of, how records sounded for me through the 90s and 2000s and stuff. In other words, what I'm saying is it still retained this quality of openness and naturalness in ways that I loved, that sometimes is missing from more modern things that are sort of over-processed and, crammed with a million plugins and everything like that. So I wondered if you talk a little bit about how you guys were making some of these records. And I feel like the Tuesday Night Recording Club, which I want to ask you about, is also a reflection of that, because you guys did this wonderful thing where you started a, YouTube channel from your studio. And I think you would have artists in for weekly, I don't know if it was weekly, but you'd have them in for a recording session I'm assuming on a Tuesday, and you guys would pick and choose a cool song or style to emulate with an original song, right? So I wrote some of the ones down here. You were like, you guys were going after like the Duran Duran sound, the Beastie Boys, Smashing Pumpkins, the Smiths, Neil Young, Nirvana. So that's my introduction to it. Take it from here. Tell us about how you like to record. What are some of the things you guys learned in Tuesday Night Recording Club?
Tuesday Night Recording Club was a really fun idea that actually Aaron, the singer of the Sheila Divine, came up with when we were brainstorming about something that would be fun to do. And way back when I first started working with Aaron, when he was working up a new song, we'd be in my kitchen or something, and he had this sort of exercise that he would do where he would go, how would Richard Butler from the Psychedelic Furs sing this song?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would make him phrase it differently, and the melody would be different. And then he would change it up and kind of be a chameleon of those types of channeling those people and seeing how it affected what was being written. And so he always kind of had a sort of a knack for that kind of thing. And he came up with this idea of, because I'm so into like studying how sounds are made and all that kind of stuff, he was like, why don't we do something where we pick a seminal album or a classic song, and I'll just write something really quick that we can use, and we'll just invite some musicians down to Zippah, and we'll block off like after the sessions on Tuesday, for this number of weeks or whatever. We'll employ this and see what happens. We'll pick something. You can research it, that week, get all the pedals you need and all the instruments, whatever it is you need technically together, whatever you can to the best of your ability in the inside of that week. And we will use that song to try to chase the sound.
Mm-hmm. And where does the name is a nod to something we should give credit to, right?
I don't know if it is. Well, Tuesday Night Recording Club we did it on Tuesday night. And like, that's really and it was a
okay.
Club.
I was thinking of, wasn't it Sheryl Crow Tuesday Night Supper Club or something? Oh,
she had an album. Yeah. Called Tuesday Night Music Club, I think.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. They are really close.
Bill Bottrell, I think, that. Right? Yeah. And then as a nod to that, I remember at one point here for like 5 minutes, Ken Coomer, who played with Wilco, he and I were getting together with, I think we brought another friend in, and we were trying to do Tuesday Night Beat Club in my studio, and we did it about once. So we didn't really have the staying power. Okay. But enough of that. So talk about some of the exciting memories about that. What were some of your favorite moments with that? and favorite sounds that you guys recreated?
Probably my favorite one, or the most surprising one to me in a number of different ways, was the 1956 Elvis Presley recording that we tried to emulate, where we used all ribbon mics and tube pre's and tape. And it was played live in the room, and utilizing the null spots of the ribbon mics, and how everybody was positioned in the room had a lot to do with that. And it was the quickest one ever because they just did a take of it and then it was done. Mm-hmm. And we were all looking at each other like, we're done. And then Annie and I cut an acetate record of it that night.
You guys were like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Did you have a record lathe?
I had another thing that is not on the list to the insurance company, of course. But yeah, I had.
It's all right. They can't even understand what you're trying to say if you tell them what it is anyway.
I know. But yeah, we did. We had a record lathe and we cut a lacquer that night because we had the time to do it. And so that was one that was really fun. The Smiths one was really fun. The Bowie Hunky Dory.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
One was really fun.
Talk a little bit about that because I love those records. What were some of the thoughts going through your head on Hunky Dory as far as like either a sound from that record you were excited about, maybe seeing if you could recreate, or was there an instrument or a recording technique?
The Mick Ronson guitar tone is just like immediately identifiable as like the song Queen Bitch is what we used as sort of a template for the song that Aaron wrote. And the use of a tone bender pedal and a wah-wah, the cocked wah method,
So very thin sounding guitar.
Yeah, it can be, but in the case of the Mick Ronson sound, it was really more of a sort of throaty, mid-rangey, 600 hertz kind of pushed vibe, And it's just really fun researching that, trying looking at live concert footage to see if the distortion pedal, the fuzz box was before the wah or after the wah. And
cool.
Just, it was really fun just learning that kind of stuff and discovering it and chasing it. And, some stuff came out a lot closer than others. And, some things we didn't have the exact piece of gear, but you try anyway. And that gives you bravery, when you go, hey, you know what? With EQ, I can make this sound like that. And you start to realize how powerful it really is, just to be able to go over and EQ something,
Yeah, or you discover where the limitations are, where you're like, wow, this won't get me to this point, or this will get me to this point.
Exactly. And it was all about that. And it was all in good fun. And
probably helped that it was a collaborative thing that was on a little bit of a deadline too. Because I think about, the ways that we're pulled in 5 million directions creatively and out of interest, and how, 1 minute we could be thinking, oh, I wonder what that Mick Ronson guitar chain and sound was. But the next minute we're like, oh, how do they get those drum sounds on Rumors, and we never actually tried to get the guitar sound. So it's cool when you set a framework around it where it's like you're going to see it through.
Yeah. And it was literally like 4 hours in the evening. We just blocked off after the normal session. And our friend Will Coughlin would come over with his camera and video and just do the video himself. He's the guitar player in Aaron's other side project, Dear Leader, and super talented. And he would edit it all. Like sometimes like that night, it was like that. So
that's helpful.
Yeah. And we were all interested in it. And it was just, a fun thing that we could do to kind of bring the community together and chase the sounds around in our little playground together.
Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. What were some things that you learned about just sort of having a YouTube channel for your studio? Did you find that that really was helpful? Did you find that it really helped, grow the studio awareness a little bit or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, maybe in hindsight. I don't know, because I never really started the channel for Tuesday Night Recording Club. I did a blog on the Zippah page. And so the blog had a video link, which was on Vimeo. It wasn't even YouTube at the time, and a SoundCloud link to the audio file, which I don't even know is working at this point. I have to go revamp the page because of all that's happened and everything. But I haven't really gone there in a while to really check, and I should.
Yeah, I know that feeling. We did a thing at my studio. I got into the idea of making videos from studios. I mean, that was kind of a thing, at a point that was new. There's all these things that come along, and rock stars, if you're young and you're listening to this, it probably sounds like, really, that making a video on your YouTube channel was a new idea at some point.
Oh yeah.
But something else is coming along. You're going to be the first one to make, I don't know what you make for the metaverse or whatever, but you're probably going to have something where you're like, oh, I'm going to be the first one to do this. But we wanted to do videos, or I did. And my thing was, invite artists in and mix it live through the MCI console so that it was a live to 2-track recording and mix. And I always loved the sound. And I know you would know this from your console, that unique quality of sound that happens when you just run all the mics through a console straight down to a 2 mix and capture that. You can't recreate that when you go into a computer and mix multi-tracks. It's just a different sound.
Yeah.
You can certainly make it sound great, but there's a thing that happens that's just so pure, when it's a totally analog signal path. But we would videotape with iPhones and stuff. And then I was trying to figure out how to grow the channel or add to our email list for the studio. And so then I was doing a thing where at the end of every performance, I'd lean into my little camera on the console with the fisheye lens on it. And I'd be like, if you want to get a copy of these recordings, then click on this link over here, click on the blue box. I think that's what I would say. And I'd point up over my head, and then I'd be like, I sure hope I can figure out a way to put a blue box up above my finger where I'm pointing later. And then if you want to join our next stereo sessions and come record and do this too, click on the red box, and I'd point over here, a little nod to the Matrix.
Right.
But it was fun, and it was a lot of fun to do those. And I actually think it really did help my studio at that point, because in fact, it was after doing a year of those that I really had some good sessions coming in. And unfortunately, when the city came along, it was like, slap on the wrist. You're not supposed to work from home. That's another topic. But what about for you? Did you feel like doing the YouTube channel thing was just an exercise in creativity, or did you start to notice that working with artists, people were aware of it, and it was sort of connecting with your career intention?
Yeah, we would share them on social media, and then just the interaction of the comments and sharing and all that kind of stuff was it was evident then that it was like, hey, this is really fun. Check this out, kind of a thing. But we didn't really have any great designs for it, other than I admit it was a selfish thing that we just wanted to do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing is I think that I love doing it. I'd probably do something like that again. It was a lot of fun to do. I do it differently. And it's funny how we go through these phases. Sometimes we can really be fascinated by technology and building and growing our studio and social media and everything. And then later on we might find ourselves not feeling quite as fascinated by it. It's like, but for the next crowd that comes along, it's for them or something like that, I don't know.
Totally. Yeah.
And I like to look back at in hindsight too and feel like all those things are okay. It's okay to give ourselves a chapter in our careers, in our studio, where we're just like, we're trying a thing, we're doing a thing, we're experiencing it,
Yeah.
We don't have to do the same thing forever.
No. And also remembering that like the one thing you're doing right now is not the thing that defines you. Like when you're young, that's what stifles a lot of young artists that I work with, is they think, oh man, if I release this right now, this is who I am in the world now. It's real. And when you're working with a lot of different people and you make hundreds and hundreds of records or whatever it is, you get to the point where you realize, oh, everybody was just kind of capturing that snapshot in their world, in their time in their life, and it's not the end of it, it's continuous. You can do that again.
Yeah. Well, we're about to close out. You got a minute for a couple more questions?
You bet.
Okay. Awesome, dude. As a writer, do you find yourself, so if Aaron's singing in the Sheila Divine, are you involved in lyrical creation and process too? I mean, you're a writer as well, I think.
Aaron is such a ninja with that stuff that I think in the earlier days, we probably had discussions about this stuff when we were in pre-production. But these days, I just let him go with that.
What's your favorite part of the creating as a band and an artist process? Do you like to write the music and play guitar?
It depends on the situation. I mean, there are some things where I'm heavily involved in the lyrical part of it. Mm-hmm. There are other times when I'm just nurturing somebody or trying to get their lyric sheet to be better. I mean, I'm marking up lyric sheets continuously with most of my artists that I'm working with.
Yeah.
And you're really just trying to help them find their vision, and realize the best version of the song that it can be, or whatever it is that you're working on. And as you learn things as you go through it, and you write hundreds of songs and you make thousands of records and you do all this different stuff. You bring those things with you, and that's the toolbox that you're pulling from, when you go to do that. But I don't have one way of doing it. I assess the situation based on the artist and what the artist's needs are. And, I realized, eventually that it's about artist intention and helping the artist, achieve their vision in a way that they want to. And, you try to make it better than they even thought it could be.
Yeah. That's a fun thing. It's a fun thing to experience when we work with a band or an artist and we see them light up because they didn't know their own music could be quite that powerful coming out of a pair of speakers.
Yeah, it's amazing how many young artists or even older artists don't realize the thing that is awesome about maybe like how their voice sounds, or the thing that drives them crazy might be that they want to fix might be the thing that makes it sound real, in a track or whatever. And once you see that stuff happen enough, you can identify it more easily. And I think that that's something that I employ a lot.
Awesome. Well, let me go to our closing question. This one, I've asked you this before, but I'll ask you again. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. Oh boy. Apparently the Wayback Studio machine wasn't caught in the fire. And you're going to go back in time and you find younger Brian and you say, listen, dude, here's the single bit of advice I want to give you. So that you can be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. When would you like to go connect with yourself, and what would you like to say?
Okay, well, there are lots of things that I would like to say, and I'm sure this is one of them that I didn't say last time.
Now's your chance, man. You're never going to get another chance. Now's the chance.
I have two things. I would tell myself to make sure my insurance policy was accurate. But besides that,
young self.
young self. Yeah. Just mention the word insurance and young self goes to sleep. Yeah. I would probably, this time around, I would probably tell myself to realize that when you're in these situations where you're producing or you're in a band collaborating and you're working together, to do your very best to take ego out of it and work towards a common goal. That's what gives me the freedom these days to make decisions for bands that I'm working with and also bands that I'm in without it becoming personal or revolving around ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably wouldn't even understand that as a younger person, me telling myself that, but it's important to like figure out the parameters of what you're working on and make your decisions about that. It's not about my idea. It's better than your idea. It's what I'm that's not the right thing to do right now because we decided we were doing this other thing and that doesn't really achieve that as well as this other suggestion that someone else has. When you're younger, I think a lot of times it can be more about, well, you don't like my idea.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is that other person was a dick.
Unavoidable in that case. So.
The interband dynamics are so funny. Like one thing I love about interband dynamics is if they're really good friends and good bands, we're still friends decades later, even though we were just assholes to each other sometimes.
Well, that's good. It's good that it worked out that way.
Young self, lose the ego, go get a job at Dunkin' Donuts.
No, don't make it about the coffee.
Well, Brian, this is awesome, man. It's so great to hang with you again. I'm so sorry and saddened that it's under these circumstances for you recently. But we want to help. So please let the rock stars know, where can we go to, what can we do to help? And I guess partly I can answer that. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. But where would you like the rock stars to go learn more about you? I believe we can still go see the studio. The website's still there if we want to go see what it looks like or looked like.
Yeah, Zippah.com is still up, and I'll update it and let people know that Annie and I are working. We're just kind of like moving around from studio to studio at the moment. But
so we can still make records with you.
You can.
Awesome.
Actually right after this. I'm going to a session. So
awesome. Well, we don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah.
And then there is a fundraiser still. Assuming it's still going as this airs, but if it is, we should definitely click through and check it out.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for getting the word out. And thank you for the support too. And, while I have the power of the airwaves here, I want to thank everybody for just everything that they've done to help us in this like really tricky time. And it's really keeping me positive, and it's given me the fuel to keep going. Now more than ever, I just want a studio again. I want to rebuild it, and I want to make it great. I want to make it better than it was if I can.
Yeah, awesome. And if rock stars who are just curious about various recording stuff or things that maybe in your Tuesday night recording club, they see a way you recorded something, they want to reach out with questions. Can they reach you on your website?
Yeah, they can email through the website. It's pretty easy to get a hold of me. You can find me on Instagram too, Brian Charles. Okay, awesome. Well, dude, thank you again so much for being here. Rockstars, please scroll down to the show notes, click through the donation link right there if you'd like to help, or go check out Zippah Studio and the website. And then do check out Tuesday Night Recording Club too, and watch some of the cool videos and see some of the ways they're recording. The Duran Duran stuff was great. I listened to it. I was like, sounds like Duran Duran. I want to know how you did it. I mean, we didn't really get into it, but questions. I thought maybe we can circle back another day for this, but talking about with different styles and everything, you must have recorded the instruments differently in each case, like record the drums a little differently, record the guitars, all that stuff. But it's very cool to go see that on your channel. Yeah. And if you want more information, you can go to the Zippah.com website and click on Tuesday Night Recording Club. And I did keep a blog. So there was a technical blog of mics I used, EQ settings, and instruments of note on each one of those.
Okay, that's great. Well, dude, great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope your next session rocks. And rock stars, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, man. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who helped make this episode possible. API, OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of their plugins. And sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at Sampley.app, or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. And don't forget to use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in the description of the podcast. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to give a big thank you to our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks, guys. And thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.